Hello, this is Craig Mertens. I am the General Manager of GraphicsFlow. Welcome to our Decorator Academy class today. 3 pricing strategies to avoid. I've got my good friend Aaron Montgomery on the class today. Say hi, Aaron.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me, Craig.
You're welcome. I'm broadcasting from Scottsdale, Arizona. And what's your weather like over there?
We're actually going to get some more winter weather here. I'm in the St. Louis area, just west of St. Louis, in a little town called St. Peter's. So we're unseasonably warm for here, but snow's coming back here soon, I think.
Yeah, well, we're getting tired of this 80-degree weather, so I think the temperature is going to
I
drop
was going to
here.
say, Terry
So
always jokes that you guys got 9 inches of sunshine and it just keeps coming.
yeah, usually winter here is over by 10 a.m. in the wintertime. But
I love it.
so I'm really excited about this topic. We've had so many requests over the years for people wanting to get guidance on pricing, and it really is a challenging topic. And having been in the industry a long time on the side of being a manufacturer's rep and also screen printing and embroidery business, it's a very fluid topic, and there's no right or wrong answers to pricing, but there's definitely a lot of bad ideas.
Yeah.
And I love the title of the class, 3 pricing strategies to avoid, and even
Yes.
better, what to do instead. And so
Yes.
I'm going to turn it over to Aaron, and I'm going to bow out in the video, and we'll pop back in at the end. Just FYI, kind of how we do this. If you haven't been on here before, we will keep an eye on the questions, but we will not answer the questions till the end of the webcast because we want to kind of keep things moving. So please encourage you in the question panel to include your questions, and we will do our very best to answer them at the end of the webcast. So I'm going to mute my mic and bow out of the video. All right, over to you,
Awesome.
Aaron.
Great. All right. Well, I'm going to close off my video too, so you guys can just see the important information and see if get that out of the way. All right, guys. Well, again, thanks so much for having me, Craig. This is really exciting. I am excited to be here sharing my thoughts on pricing strategies to avoid. I've been fortunate enough to hold several different positions in the industry, sales and marketing management mainly. Actually, even so far back as when I first met Craig really early on in my career, I worked at a company called US Screen Printing Institute. Craig worked across the parking lot at another great company. And so from all that time forward, I've learned pricing is something that is actually a bit more of an art form than people maybe realize. And what ends up happening is we worry that no one's going to pay the price we ask, or that we're maybe leaving money on the table and are not making enough profit to survive. And so we have those back and forth worries. Now, I've set pricing and helped others review their pricing. And through that process over the last 22 years here, I've found one area that I think trumps all the others. Now, being in the industry for almost 22 years now, I've also seen some bad advice, which we kind of talked about. That's why we're talking about the pricing strategies to avoid. And it just seems to repeat more and more. And apparently it's been repeated so often that people believe it's true and keep sharing it. I see this stuff almost daily. Now, the great news here is that that sharing of what might look like bad advice is actually well-meaning. And I think really the problem is people just tend to oversimplify pricing. And like I said, pricing is an art form, but we've got to back it up with numbers, the science, so to speak. And we can't just simplify it by multiplying a few numbers or copying from a neighbor or just finding that lowest common denominator. So I want to talk to you today again about 3 pricing strategies to avoid, but I also want to leave plenty of time for us to talk about what to do instead. So let me get into who I am here real quick, just in case you're curious. I am the co-founder of a company called Our Success Group. And some of you may have also heard me on the industry's oldest podcast called The Two Regular Guys. I've already shared a smidge about me with my time back at US Screen, so I won't go real deep because that's not really what we're here about here today. I'm a total open book, so you guys can always reach out to me afterwards and ask me any questions that you want. I'm really honored to be sharing this and kind of partaking in this amazing company and product in GraphicsFlow. So you guys are lucky to have such a resource available to you here with this kind of training and all the stuff that they do. I would love to know a little bit more about you. As Craig said, we'll kind of get the questions at the end. But I'm curious, what stage of your business are you in? Are you at that full-time and it's your complete source of income? Maybe it's a side hustle that brings in extra cash for you. Maybe you haven't even started your business yet. That's okay too. Maybe you've got a hobby that you're trying to make a business and it just remains a hobby because you're not making any money at it yet. So just curious to know what kind of stage of the business you guys are at. Also would love to know how long you've been in business for. So while you guys are doing that, I just want to give you a little bit more of an idea about who I am. I'm a big dreamer and I believe in others. And so this is my favorite quote, which might help you understand a little more about me. It's called, "The greatest danger for most of us lies in not setting our aim too high and falling short, but in setting our aim too low and achieving the mark." And this was said by Michelangelo, who's a famous painter from way back. He painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, is what he's most well known for. So just that idea of we need to be reaching for the stars and setting big marks. And so that's kind of a little bit about me. The other thing that I want to give you guys here is you'll see a little cartoon. I just wanted to bring you a little humor before we get started. It's according to Edutopia, which is part of the George Lucas Educational Foundation. Humor activates the brain's dopamine reward system, stimulating goal-oriented motivation and long-term memory. So I always like to start off with a little cartoon. It may not be as funny to you as it is to me, but the fake laugh will work too in getting those dopamines going. So bear with me here. The cartoon says, "Honey, the coffee maker has no filter." And then the coffee maker is saying things like, "Is that nose hair? Boy, have you put on some pounds. Who the heck picked out that sweater?" So just a little different kind of filter there to get us started here. So, all right, enough with the bad cartoons. Moving forward here. So this is our mission over at our success group. I love small business owners. You all have the characteristics and values that I totally admire. You're resourceful, you're accountable, you're industrious, you're hardworking. Everyone that's giving a business a go deserves support. And I know successful business owners are always willing to do the work and be self-starters. So it gets me totally excited to talk about small business. And so today I'm going to share these 3 pricing strategies that don't work as a cautionary tale. It's taken me 22 years to get to this point. And honestly, probably even longer than that. My dad was a CPA when I was growing up, and he specialized in working with small businesses. So I've been around small businesses my entire life. So I'm sharing these things out of my love for you guys, the small business owner. Now, if one or more of these strategies to avoid hits a little bit too close to home for you, I don't want you to be beating yourself up or even feel like we're talking or I'm talking down to you. Some of the examples I'm using might even be from you or somebody that you know, because these come directly from our industry and the comments and questions I see on Facebook. So if this does hit a little too close to home for you, that's okay. This is a really good thing because it gives you a chance to look at it from a different perspective or angle and really then decide what works for you. Now, my wife has a saying that she uses on me as I'm actually attempting right now to be a beginner yoga person. I'm just starting with yoga and I can barely touch my knees, let alone my toes. So she says this to me all the time: wherever you're at is perfectly fine. And she shares that with me to let me know that it's okay to be where I'm at, and that every time I practice, right, I stretch, I get a little more flexible. So for you guys, wherever you're at in this business journey, however you price is perfectly fine. I just want to share my experience and explain why these strategies might need a little more thought before fully employing them. Plus, I also want to share that pricing strategy that I've learned from successful business owners and one I've used in going forward. So just remember, my mission is to empower you through providing resources like this so you can achieve your idea of success. So over the next 40-ish or so minutes here, wherever you are at is perfectly fine. So just keep that in mind for me, would you? Here's our agenda. We're going to talk about the 3 things to avoid first and get into some reasons why we might want to rethink that a little bit. And then I'm going to give you the strategy that I really like. And the nice part about this strategy, it's very agnostic. It doesn't really matter what it is that you're doing for your business. In fact, this would even go outside of our industry, but I know it works really well in our industry. And then lastly, I'm going to close with what I think are the 5 keys to a good foundation in your business. So if we're ready to jump in, I'm going to get moving here. So the first strategy we want to avoid is pricing based on suggestions. This really means that the only real information you're getting for your pricing strategy is what others are charging. You know, maybe what they listed it for on Etsy as an example, or what does the business up the street charge? And then maybe you charge the same or a little bit more. So I want to take a look at why that might need a little bit of rethinking with you guys here. So this was an actual post that I pulled off of Facebook, and it's somebody going out and asking, what does everyone sell their mugs for? So this is somebody probably doing sublimation, I'd guess, or something along those lines. And or another example here, a little longer post, but actually the same thing. I have a pretty large order. What do you charge? I'm terrible at pricing, right? They've already set themselves up for failure. But people ask this because they're not confident in their pricing, and they want to make sure that they don't overprice and lose out on business, or that they underprice and leave money on the table. And while I fully understand why people do this, and honestly, I've done this myself, but I only do this as a way for market research. What is the market potential? What could I potentially sell this product for? So the strategy to avoid is using that feedback or market research as just the basis of your pricing. So if we go back to the mug example there, if the feedback you got was $5 per mug and you use that, you might not know the rest of the story from the person that gave you that feedback. Maybe they do nothing but make mugs all day long. Maybe they're actually importing full containers of mugs, and because they make thousands of mugs a day, $5 for that mug works for them. Now, without knowing your numbers, how much does it cost you to be in business and just open your doors each day, right? You should be paying yourself in that number. You should be planning for future upgrades, things like that. But those costs will be what actually determines if $5 per mug works for your business. Are you confident enough in your numbers that if you sell a mug for $5, that it won't actually end up costing you $7 or $8? How many orders where you lose $2 to $3 each can your business sustain? If you're losing money on each order, it doesn't matter how much more business you get, you're never going to recover. You can't make up in volume if you're losing money every time. So I mentioned US Screen at the beginning of this presentation, and I don't work for them anymore because they are out of business. Shortly after they made their way onto the Inc. magazine top 5,000 list, they ended up going bankrupt, and because they were selling items for less than it cost, in my opinion. So they didn't necessarily know their exact numbers, and they based their pricing on what they thought they could get for it at the time. And then that started to spiral out of control. They needed cash to cover payroll, so they would reduce their prices again to get the cash in, and it just kept spiraling out of control from there. And that was my first real lesson in pricing. And at that point, I realized I had a lot to learn, because I was all on board. Okay, yep, let's just keep lowering the price and we'll catch up somehow, right? So your business and your ideal customer's needs, both those things are very different. So what somebody else would charge for a mug and what you should charge for a mug are two separate realities. And the same holds true for searching on Etsy or even the suggested manufacturing pricing. If you can't make money with that product, you need to maybe not make that product, or you've got to find a way to market to somebody else that is willing to pay what you need to charge for it. So let's think about it this way. Before Starbucks came along, not many people in the US were willing to pay $5 or more for a cup of coffee. Now, today, there are almost 15,000 Starbucks in the United States, and that's just in the United States. On top of that, places that used to give away their coffee if you bought a donut, for example, Dunkin' Donuts. I remember when I was a kid, we'd go in and get a donut and my dad would get a free coffee or a 5-cent coffee. Now they are also charging $5 for that extra whip latte cappuccino sugary mess, which I really love myself, and I'm willing to pay that $5 for it. But it just took that change of mindset. It took that shifting in, okay, let's find somebody who's willing to pay the $5 for the cup of coffee. So we can use what others share, and we can look at our competitors' pricing, or we can get details from the manufacturer of a suggested price, and that's all fine and dandy for your market research only, right? Don't use that as your pricing strategy. So that's the first one we want to avoid here. Let's get into the second one. All right, the next one is really common because I think a lot of times we just spend so much time in the creativity of the things that we make, the artwork. You've got great graphics tools here, but then you're adding to it and you're getting creative with how to use all these things from GraphicsFlow. And we spend all of our creativity there on the product, but we don't get creative enough with our pricing. We're just going to be 5 cents cheaper than the guy up the street. But we're in an industry that is not made to be a commodity. So let's talk about why the strategy could also use some more rethinking here. Now, way too many businesses have this as their pricing strategy. Oh, lowest price guaranteed. Oh my gosh, price match. We're gonna match any price, anytime, come on in. Best price promise, we promise you. Well, here's what happens. Your competitors then look at your price and they've got a price match guarantee too. And so they lower their price. And then you look at their price and you've got to lower your price. And then a customer comes to them and says, hey, so-and-so up the street does this. Okay, well, they lower their price. And then the next person lowers their price. So you see where this is going, right? We're having a race to the bottom. The thing is, not only will that keep you from making a profit, it ends up making price the lowest common denominator in the conversation. In the decorating world, price being the lowest common denominator is very, very challenging. We're taking a base product and we're trying to make it worth more to the customer. Therefore, that increases the perceived value. It doesn't increase the utility of the shirt necessarily by having a picture on it or in my case, a quote from Michelangelo. The only way to actually be cheaper when it comes to cost than everyone else is to be extremely efficient and also have really deep pockets to buy at the cheapest prices possible when you're buying that blank item. You've got to buy a lot to get the cheapest price possible. Now, if one of your core values is being thrifty, totally understandable, then you certainly can position yourself as the value option, but there's always going to be somebody willing to do it for less. So unfortunately, most of those people willing to do it for less than you probably don't have a pricing strategy, and they're just beginning their march to going out of business. So the nature of what we do is all about adding perceived value, and perceived value and being the lowest price do not mix at all. So when you become a commodity by being the lowest price, it doesn't work unless you have unlimited capital. So if anybody has unlimited capital here, I'd like you to just go ahead and put your address in the chat, and I will show up at your door and help you spend some of that money. No, okay, totally kidding. Don't put your address in the chat. Not really asking for that. But the idea here is that you've got to have lots of capital to be able to weather and beat everybody to the bottom of that price game. So the final note here on this section before I move to the next one, because again, I want to get to where I'm sharing with what you can be doing, is it is totally fine to be the lowest price out of any of your competitor on things. I'm not saying that that's not the way to do it. What I'm saying is, as long as your unique numbers will allow you to make the profit that you need to reach your idea of success, then you can be that low price leader. And that typically only goes for a couple of products because you can be very good at it. You know, I've worked with several companies who've been extremely focused on a product and got so good at making it and were able to be very successful as the low cost leader. It worked for them, but they also knew their numbers inside and out. They knew how long it took them to make everything. They had every minute calculated out, every second calculated out in some cases, and they stayed extremely on top of any pricing change or any challenges that were coming to the forefront. In fact, that dealing with right now, our industry from the COVID pandemic has seen, in some cases, up to a 42% cost increase on certain things. So those kinds of increases are massive, and you have to be able to stay on top of that. But then on the other side of that, I know there are companies who I've worked with that are totally overwhelmed. You know, they've lowered their prices to get more business. They end up being so busy, they can't keep up. And while that's a good problem at first to be really busy, they also then end up not having any time for their families. They don't have any time to be learning and growing anymore. They can't create workflow and processes that are going to allow them to dig out of that hole of being overwhelmed. But all they need to do is raise their prices, which I know probably means a little less sales. They're not going to have as much business, but with the increased prices, it actually means more profit. So a good example of this was a gentleman who I was working with, and I knew that he was way underpricing his product. So just to kind of get his attention, I threw out just a wild number. I said to him, so what would happen if you doubled your prices? And I mean, his jaw hit the floor and he was almost appalled. I was worried that he was just gonna hang up the phone. And I could hear it in his voice, and he just said, oh my gosh, I can never do that. I will end up losing half my business. And I immediately reacted to him and I said, exactly, that's my point. And since I was kind of setting him up for that, I did quickly jump in and just explain to him, you'd be doing half the work for the same amount of money. So if he doubled his prices, loses half of his business, still making the same money, doing half the work. Doesn't that sound like a pretty nice place to be? Now, I know that's extreme, and I wasn't actually telling him to double his prices. I was just showing him that he really needed to think about raising his prices so he could dig out. And if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed and can't keep up, now is as good of time as any to raise your prices. You've got all sorts of news out there about the supply chain issues, costs going up, all that kind of stuff happening that's just present in everybody's world right now. And it's, people understand it, right? So no better time than right now to raise those prices. So I'd say go out and raise your prices today if you're feeling that way. But we'll get to a little more details on that here in a second. All right, last one here. And this is the big one. And I bet I could go look through some posts that just happened this week even on some industry Facebook groups and find somewhere where someone suggested a simple formula for pricing. So this cost times 3 price formula. If you're an embroiderer, maybe you've heard the dollar per thousand stitch formula out there. You got all these things. And I get it. I'm a big fan of formulas actually myself, because it allows us to plug something in and easily get us closer to where we want to go. But as a strategy to just simply run with a suggestion from a Facebook post, you're oversimplifying it. And when you say cost times 3, that leaves me with so many questions. I get like overwhelmed with questions almost. So let me explain. I've kind of broken this down a little bit for you because this exact thing happened here. So this was an example I used earlier for somebody asking how much to charge for this. And the other challenge with then using somebody else's numbers, but then also you also have to wade through all the not so great advice, even though it might be well-meaning here. So the top response you see to that post is from the gentleman who helped me start OSG, Todd Downing. And he asked a clarifying question about, okay, what exactly are you looking for? What exactly are your numbers telling you? And this is where people should be heading when it comes to pricing. But not too long after he posted that, almost immediately after, somebody who was going to remain nameless posted, your total cost times 3 equals what you charge the customer, like definitively. And so, like I said, this leaves me with a ton of questions. What does total cost mean? Are you factoring in your time? Do you factor in the spoilage or mess ups? Do you factor in, freight out, right? Before we got started, Craig and I had a bit of a conversation about the whole freight situation, and we'll get into that. Packaging, and just to definitively say that equals what you charge your customers, that also leaves me with another question. Why? Where is this magic 3 number coming from? What gods rained this down on us and said times 3 and you're going to be a successful business? What if I timesed it by 4? Would that make me more profitable? Or what if I timesed it by 2? Am I going to win more business because I'm cheaper, right? So I know the advice is well-meaning, but what I did is I broke these down into a couple of different scenarios and to help you understand why you may want to avoid this type of advice. So if we go back to that post, and I'm just pulling all this information out, so if you missed it, trust me, the numbers are correct here. They were paying $5.50 for a shirt. I know that might seem a little high for some people, but that just happened to be what they said they were paying. They paying $3 for the transfers. So that made their total cost $8.50. Now, if we use that 3X pricing model, that should give us a price of $25.50. In the post, they said that this order was for 300 shirts. So based on all that, that's $7,650. Woohoo, that's a nice order. Yes, let's do that. And if your cost is $8.50, that's $5,100 in profit. Wow, sounds amazing. Let's do that all day, every day, a couple times a day if we can, right? But spoiler alert here, the reality is that's not the total cost. So let's take a look at this. So what I did is I reached out to some of the folks that are in our success group and just asked them, said, hey, if this was a scenario you were in, how would you look at this? Tell me what your business does. And this particular first company that I asked, this is not really ideally what they do. So they were looking at this job and they said, okay, so if you go back to the post, it says pressing in 3 locations. They're going to inspect and package that after they get done pressing it. So they figured for them it was going to take about 10 minutes per shirt. Now, they also knew their numbers, which is a big part of what we're going to be talking about here. And for them, it costs them $100 per hour to have their doors open. That's their overhead. They also plan for spoilage and mess ups, and they have inbound freight and packaging. So you can see all the numbers, how they kind of work out there. When you got $10 and at $100 an hour, $16.67 for your pressing labor. So their actual cost was $26.20 if they were to take on that 300-piece job. But if they didn't have that information and they just priced it by 3x, then they would actually end up losing $210 on that job when it came to actual profit. So every time they took a job like that, and if they didn't know their numbers and they just said, oh, times 3, it'll be great, then they're not making profit. They're actually running themselves out of business. So that's scenario 1. Let's look at the opposite end of that spectrum. So this other company I talked to, this is actually a little more up their alley, kind of what they do. And so they're a lot more efficient at it. And again, still pressing in 3 locations. They're still going to inspect and package and take all that into account. But with everything there, they're more efficient. So they're 5 minutes per shirt is what they estimate that they've determined from their workflow process. And they also have a little bit tighter costs. Their overhead only $75 per hour to have their door open. So great, same deal. They plan for spoilage and inbound freight. And so their actual costs end up being $17.03. But again, if they didn't know all that information and they just went with that 3x pricing model, they were maybe going to charge the customer $25.50. But let's say that the market, or the customer's budget in this case, dictated that $21 was the right price. Well, if they didn't know their numbers and they were just relying on the 3x, they would go, yep, sorry, I can't do it for $21. $25.50 is my price. Well, the reality is, if they charge $21 for the shirt and their actual cost is $17.03, they would have actually potentially made $1,191 in profit. So they would have lost that job because they overpriced, but yet they could have won the job and still made a nice profit. So making $1,000 profit is a pretty nice job, right? So in both of those cases, when you rely on a simple suggested formula from someone who knows nothing about your business, that could be a recipe for disaster. Not all the time, and sure, it's a great starting point. You're going to lose some jobs you should win, and you're going to win some jobs that you probably shouldn't have taken. In both cases, you're kind of starting that downward spiral that we've talked about. But here's the great part. Not all hope is lost. This is not all doom and gloom. Remember the second part, what to do instead. So let's talk about that now. Let's wrap towards the end here with talking about that. So here's what I would suggest, and this is what I use. It's called market value based on your numbers. And the market value strategy is the one strategy for me that always comes out on top. So all you have to do is you just have to go and employ that market value strategy, and you're guaranteed success. So there you go. Thank you. Appreciate your time. Tip your waitresses. No, okay, totally kidding. Sorry, Craig, just kidding. I guess I should explain what market value strategy is. So the simple way to explain it, and I'm going to use a picture to help me here a little bit, is your strategy should be solely based on what your market value is. It is the value your ideal customers are happy to exchange, and it is a value your bottom line is happy to receive to make it grow. So your market value is the value you bring to the market, period, right? I mean, it seems pretty simple. Your ideal customer and your business are unique to you only. So buyer's happy with the price, seller is happy with the price. That is the market value strategy. Now, I've said ideal customer several times today already, so let me define that for you. Most new businesses jump in with tons of energy and enthusiasm, and they just go talk to anyone who will listen. I think that's great. We've got to start somewhere. And you start asking people what you can help them with, and you end up taking on anything you perceive you can make money with. You want to be everything to everybody. Oh, I don't know if I can do that, but I'll figure it out, right? But what ends up happening is you end up being nothing to no one. The reality is you spend 80% of your time with 20% of your customers, but the problem is only 20% of your customers will make up 80% of your revenue. So you have to get focused on that top 20% of those customers who are your ideal customers. They are the ones who will allow you to work on projects that you enjoy doing. Their jobs are more profitable as you have more efficiency with it, and you know all the ins and outs and what makes them happy. And even better, that top 20%, that ideal customer, they also love doing business with you so much that they help you attract more of the people like them. So to understand your market value, you first have to be clear on who your market is. Let me give you another example here. So the example here is, if someone was trying to sell me a really expensive car, maybe it's because of the status of the car, you know, it's a Mercedes or something, I don't know what a status would be for whoever, whatever it is for you. Maybe it's all the horsepower that's there, or the rarity, it's vintage and all that stuff. Here's the deal, I'm not a car guy. So for me, a car is all about utility. Can it easily get me from point A to point B, and does it make my life easier? So one of my personal goals is to own a self-driving car. And the current car that I have is actually pretty close to that. It's got this lane assist and front and rear sensors and cameras, but it's not this super cool car that everybody's like, oh, wow. You know, it isn't loud, it isn't flashy. It's a Hyundai. You know, it's just a plain old Hyundai. But this is what happens to us when we try to sell really expensive cars to people who only care about utility. And to win that job, we end up lowering our prices and don't make the profit we need for success. So instead, we should be focusing on the utility of what we sell. How is your product going to solve a problem for somebody? And that problem doesn't have to be to cure world hunger or to create peace on earth. If it is, that's what you're working toward, great, I'm all for it. But most people's problems are things like not being able to stand out in their community. So maybe you can help them with promotional products or corporate wear or their brand identity, right? Or maybe they're wanting to belong to a group, things like family reunion shirts. People need the tactile products that we as decorators can provide to allow groups to kind of feel in unison. So at the end of the day, the family shirts for the Disney vacation, it's just that. It's a group wanting to identify together, and people are willing to pay a premium for that. So what problem do you solve, and how can you increase the perceived value for your customer? Is it things like fast turnaround or low or no minimums? You know, if you feel like you need more than what your perceived market value is, then you need to determine how to add more value or to find a different target audience. Value and cost and price, they all seem very similar, right? When you hear those three words together, our brains almost automatically go, oh, that's just the same. But in actuality, they're quite different. What you charge is based on the value you're able to create for your customers and how much they're willing to exchange for that perceived value. So it's why Walmart charges $5 for a low-cut white shirt. In fact, if you went and looked it up, you can find a 2-pack for $10. And a very similar low-cut white shirt can be found on this place called The Row via Net-a-Porter. And there'll be a link that you can get later on if you want it, but go look it up too. And very similar shirt, but that shirt sells for $280. And the last time I was over there, their site said they were out of stock currently. So that plain white t-shirt sold for $280 versus $5. I know the cost to produce both of those are very similar, most likely, but it's that perceived value. That's the difference. It's that experience with the product. It's the status of the product. It's the indirect value that you can't actually put a price tag on when it comes to cost, but you can put a price tag on it when it comes to value. It's owning one shirt over another. That's how that pricing is determined. Now, I know all of this sounds maybe a little too good to be true. You know, I can just sell these things for whatever I want and I get it, right? Yes, well, and no. So this is where you've got to put some work in. You have to have a clear understanding of your costs and your overhead first and foremost. You have to have a plan for paying yourself if you want to have a successful long-term business. You have to create perceived value by having what most people would consider a unique value proposition, what's in it for your customers. And once you have some clarity about all of that, then you need to go about creating your business from that perspective through different daily actions, getting feedback on those actions, and then making adjustments and growing. We have to build this. But by being clear on what value you bring to your ideal customer, you know, things like how do you solve their problems or how do you support what's important to them, that's where we start coming up with this market value strategy that we can use. Now, as I mentioned, pricing is a bit of an art form, but we can use our numbers as a science to get it right and give us a great starting point. Now, any advice in a reply to a Facebook post, I'd be a little leery about running with that as your strategy. So you want to price your products for profit is a core foundation for any successful business. Now, this advice that you get from maybe a Facebook post or somewhere else, that could be a small amount of feedback for you, and that's totally fine. In fact, I don't want you to even take the things that I've said here and set your pricing strategy based solely on what I've said so far. But I do want to give you the tools here that you can go and build a solid pricing strategy for your business. So I'm going to give you these 6 steps here. And so the first step is you need to identify and calculate your shop rate. We talked about that in those scenarios. How much does it cost you to just open your doors each day? And then what does that hourly rate become? And make sure that this number includes a plan for paying yourself and a plan for future growth. You need a new piece of equipment in a couple of years. Maybe your computer, computers after 2 or 3 years, they can kind of become obsolete. We don't want to be running on Windows 3 anymore, right? We need to keep up with the times, and we need to plan for that future growth. So looking at things like that. So that's the first thing. You need to identify and calculate your shop rate. The second thing we have to get our arms around here is identify and calculate all the direct costs that are associated with each job. So it's one thing to say, okay, my blank shirt costs this, the transfers cost this. What about things like blowout sheets? Or what about things like tape or other supplies that you're going to need? What about things like, maybe you don't get everyone right every time. That's part of decorating. We have what's called spoilage. Inbound freight. How much did it cost you to get those blanks? And then another thing that people don't think about is your outbound freight. People expect to get shipping for free, but the reality is deep down, we know shipping's not free. Even if it says it's free, it's got to be calculated in there somewhere. Just because you get free shipping from Amazon, most of us forget that every year we pay 120, I think it's going to be 130, maybe $140 this upcoming year to get that quote unquote free shipping. Plus people are adding that into their price on top of that. So what are all the actual costs that you can directly associate with each job? So have your arms around that. Number 3 is we have to calculate our total time to create each job. And you want to look at this like a pit stop. When you're in business and you're decorating, it's one thing when you have a hobby and you're just kind of playing and you've got all the time in the world. When you want to have a business, it's every little minute counts, and that can be the difference between profit and not profit. You have to look at your workflow and your efficiency. How can I save time? I mean, we talk about inside our success group, even the little things like how you take the shirt off of a heat press, right? That little change in where your heat press is sitting versus how you take it off versus where it's going next. And all of those little things can end up being a big difference. So you have to look for efficiencies. And then we need to determine our final full cost to produce. So everything we talked about there, your shop rate, so then that allows you to put a number to how much time it takes. And then you also have all those direct costs, plus, you want to have a profit, right? So those are all your direct costs, but do you want to make 20, what does your company need to make? It might not be 40, 50%. It might be 10% is good for you. So whatever it is for you, you've got to figure out that desired profit margin, but you got to then be able to calculate all that stuff together. We do that inside our success group with a spreadsheet and a whole tool wrapped around that. So we're checking out. I'm happy to share more about that. And then the next step in the process here is we have to determine your ideal customers and understand what they value. What is that problem that you solve? We talked a lot about this already, so I won't keep banging this dead horse here, but understanding what they value then allows you to understand the next step here, which is the 6th step, is we have to review our market potential. And this is solely based on what is it that your customers are willing to pay. So if you don't think they're willing to pay what you need to make, and then that's the versus the required selling price. That's your total cost plus the profit. So what you need to make versus what they're willing to pay, that's what we've got there. Now, once you have that understanding, you've got an if this, then that scenario here. If the market potential is higher than your RSP, your required selling price, start selling the product, sell it often, get out there, sell. This means if you, market is willing to spend $10 for this product and your cost is $7, or your cost plus profit is $7, then yes, sell it for $10, sell it often, get after it, and you're good to go. Now, on the flip side of that, if the market potential is lower, so maybe the market's only willing to pay $5, but what your need is $7, then you have to then determine how can we create more value, or how can we find a new market to sell to? Oh, people in my area aren't willing to pay that. Well, they wear Nike shoes, they have designer handbags and things like that. So they will pay more than what you're charging for that shirt. It's just a matter of figuring out how to create that same value experience for them, or finding a new group that is willing to pay more for what you offer. All right, so that's what I've got there for that market value strategy. And then just to close this up, I know we're right in on time here. I think we're doing good. So let me kind of close this up with my last final thought here about the 5 core foundations that I believe every business needs to be successful. And this really allows us to have this pricing strategy that's going to work for you. So the first thing on the list, and we've talked about this, we've got to know our numbers. What's that shop rate? And you're never going to know what to price your product at if you don't know how much it costs you to be in business. This is your overhead, this is paying yourself, this is planning for the future. All of those things are part of knowing your numbers. And then the next part here is pricing for profit. We need to understand how to get our arms around as close to possible your actual cost, including all of those extra things like freight and supplies and spoilage and all that kind of stuff, getting as close to that as possible. Pricing for profit is not just about knowing how much your blank costs and how much that ink or whatever costs you there. It is all those other things. So that's the next part on pricing for profit. The next thing that's really important in any business is our workflow and organization. If your idea is to grow your business, then without proper workflow and organization, how are you going to manage that? Do you have documented workflow and processes in place? And if you don't, how are you going to start doing that? How can you organize this in such a way that you can get quality work done on time every time? And as you grow, can you easily hire somebody and plug them in because they've got a way to, this is the way we do it here at XYZ company, right? That's your workflow and organization. And like I talked about, every minute matters when it comes to your profit because we know our overhead of how much it costs us to be in business. So how much more work can we get out in that hour will make us more profit. The fourth thing is delivery and follow-up. Now I know you think, oh, delivery and follow-up, okay, I'm gonna ship the product and then I'm gonna call them and ask them if they're good, right? Pretty simple. Well, this is even more. To me, this section is all about, this is your customer service plan. How are you gonna wow your customers? How are you gonna create more word of mouth sales? How are you gonna get them coming back? How are you gonna turn your customers into your salespeople? Right, so this delivery and follow-up is all about exceeding expectations. So you have to have that foundation in your business, a plan for doing that. And then last but not least, the fifth foundation here is we need to have a marketing foundation. I talked a lot about ideal customers today, and that really is your marketing foundation. Look at who your ideal customers are, what the unique value proposition is that you have, and then how are you going to best go to market? And all of that actually should be done before you start posting on Facebook. Everybody thinks about marketing. Oh yeah, I'm going to market. I'm going to post on Facebook. I'm going to send an email blast. Well, that's just the very last bit of marketing. Real marketing is all about really understanding your business, your customers, and how you fit into the mix of everybody. So you have to have that foundation, and then that's going to blast you off towards success. So Craig, that's kind of what I have. I do have a little thank you thing that I'll pop up there for people to see, but I'll put my thing up there and I'll tell people about what's at this later. But let's get into some questions here. I wanted to leave plenty of time for that.
Yeah, excellent job, Aaron. It's painful a little bit for me to see, that true cost thing, right? Because remember when we had our screen printing business and we sold out to a big investment group, and that was the first thing they did is they looked at all of our true costs. And if you can believe this, our salespeople, not from our company, when we sold to National Screen Print, their salespeople could determine their own pricing, and they got paid a commission based on net profit. So they could do a deal that, maybe they could make, sell a t-shirt for $5.50 to Maurice's, and maybe cost was $6 and they get 10% of 50 cents, right?
Yeah.
So knowing that true cost thing, wow, that's painful and labor. I'm glad you put in shop rate. I had a huge argument with our lead programmer. We were writing some pricing software about shop rate. He's like,
Yeah.
Greg, you have to do a shop rate. That's the
Yeah.
only way you can stay in business. And because you got to keep your doors open, you got to have the lights on, electricity. You have to do. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. I've got as the questions come in, I got a couple questions I'm going to fire at you.
Okay.
So how do you see graphics fitting into your pricing equation?
Yeah, this is a great one because it can be such a challenge for people because, again, that's time, right? You've got to have some time to do graphics and things like that. But it's not somebody's not coming to you necessarily. The end product they're getting is not the graphic. Now that is actually what they're coming to you for, is the graphics and how you're going to make that look amazing for them based on that. So you've got to charge for that. But finding a way to figure out where that fits, I like to look at it this way. I like to say, okay, here's my normal hourly rate for creating graphics or doing something custom for you, and then having that. Because I look at it this way: every time I have this is my policy, this is the thing that is part of our business, this is how we operate, that allows me the opportunity to say, but because you're special, this one time I'm going to move away from that, right? So we normally charge $50 for a custom graphic, or $100, whatever it is, the number for you. But Mr. or Mrs. new customer, this 300 piece order is really important to us. We'd love to be your go-to for shirts. So this time we're going to waive that. We're going to build this in. You have to kind of understand where you're going to use that and play with that. But I think graphics are definitely something that I would put into my kind of overhead. How much time do you spend on average on graphics, and put that into your overhead so you're covered, but then also have that opportunity to, maybe waive it every once in a while, I guess is the best way to put it.
It's interesting talking, when we launched the new art portal, which has been a dream of mine for as long as I can remember, talking to business owners, I always lay out this example. You know how your customers come to you and they've gone on to Custom Ink and they've designed something and screen grabbed it, or Etsy search or Facebook or a random Google search, and can you do this?
Yeah.
And the business owners are always like, yeah, we hate that. We don't want that. It's too time consuming. It drives me nuts. I'm always having to jump through hoops to create artwork. There's a real expense to doing that. And one of the things that I see in the industry is, and we talked about this before the webcast, was people are moving more towards e-commerce.
Yeah.
And how are they judging you? What's the differentiator between you and other people? I think graphics is a huge one. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, you look around and you can see that. You and I are having this conversation also beforehand, right? We're said about 18 inches away from a camera here, so we're that close. We don't have to be 6 feet away because we've got a camera in between. I don't have that front door anymore like I used to. You can't just walk in and get that, oh wow, this is my home family feeling. I need to have that feeling as soon as I see the person online, as soon as I kind of see examples of their work, things like that. So I think graphics are more important than ever. I mean, at our success group, we actually just spent a pretty sizable amount of money we're only a year old and we've already updated our look just based on feedback. We needed to improve our graphics. And so I think graphics are really important, Craig, to answer your question finally.
Yeah, I get sometimes kind of hypercritical of clients, like looking at their websites, and we get a lot of times clients will apologize. My website needs lots of work. It doesn't honestly take a lot of energy to spruce your website up if you just commit to it. I think it's kind of a Saturday morning type of thing. And I was on a client's website yesterday, and they had a button for gallery. I was actually setting up their art portal, and they had a button for gallery. And I hit the gallery button, and I was like, wow, these people get it. They do lots of different types of printing, and they have examples of vehicle wraps and examples of signs and examples of apparel and embroidery and awards and all the different things they do. And it dawned on me, I was talking to him, I said, you guys don't discount, do you? And he goes, we don't need to. I says, we do a great job. We're creative. People come to us because they know we're creative.
Yep.
and that we'll always come up with something great for them. Whether we're
Yeah.
wrapping their car or doing their t-shirts. And there used to be this equation, and I can't remember where I heard it first, but I'm not going to take credit for it, but it's really good. Price, value, service. Pick your favorite two.
There you go. That's exactly it.
And you talked about being the low cost leader. It's a race to the bottom. There's always somebody willing to go lower. And you know what they call those people?
What?
Former business owners.
I figured something good like that was
Yeah.
coming.
So and they're the ones that make bankruptcy attorneys happy. So in terms of what boundaries with clients, you talk to a client and they're wanting a better deal. There's some people are just wired that way, and it
Yeah.
does tend to be a little regional.
Yeah.
So some advice when somebody asks you for a better deal, what do you tell them?
Yeah, this is a great question because I think that a lot of people get lost in this whole idea of the customer always being right. And I'm a massive customer service person. I think that if you have really good customer service, that's the best way to be in a long-term profitable company. But customer service is not about, oh, they want a discount, so I have to give them a discount, or they want this, so I have to give them this. Customer service is all about setting the expectation, and then making sure that you follow through on that expectation, and either make sure that you hit the expectation or do more than the expectation. And the same thing goes with pricing. If they're wired that way, they're coming to you because they have this expectation that they should get a better price. Well, then it becomes your job to then educate them on why that's not possible, right? I don't think anybody ever goes to somebody and they want a better price because they want to put them out of business. I mean, that you just don't want to work with that person if that's the case. People just want a better price for them. They're not thinking about you at all. Once you start educating them about what goes into it, changing that perceived value, right? It's not just a plain white t-shirt. This is a memory. It's the way you go about it. And I think a lot of times when we start off with price and we're all focused on price, then your customers are going to be that way too. So
They pick
I
up
think
on
the
that
biggest
for sure.
thing is really kind of educating them about what it takes, why they're coming to you. If you think that you can get this cheaper, then you can do it yourself and see how that goes for you. And you can be out of business too soon.
Yeah, I remember when my dad was doing sales training with me back to the days of Scott Fresner and US Screen Printing Institute.
Uh-huh.
I
Yeah,
still have all my dad's sales training videos that he sold through
that's awesome.
Scott. It's crazy.
Nice.
It's like a
Oh,
trip
those are
down
awesome.
memory lane. But I remember him beating into my head, sell from a position of strength, sell from a position of strength, because
Yep.
you're right, your clients sense that weakness. And one of the things pieces of advice that I often give clients is when somebody's kind of beating on you for a better deal, it's okay to tell them, hey, listen, I'm just like you. I like to find out where the line is. I like to find out, is this the best deal I can possibly get? And I'm
Yep.
here to tell you that, this is it. This is the best deal I can give you because I have a responsibility to make sure that I have money left over after we get done processing your order. So I'll walk you right up to that line, but I can't take you 1 foot over.
Yeah.
And, it's amazing how much that disarms people because you're kind of letting them off the hook. Because in
Yeah.
a sense, what you're doing is saying it's okay to ask, so you're not embarrassing them or shaming them,
Yep.
but you're saying, this is my tolerance level. And I think one of the things that I think is a little bit scary for clients, maybe you can relate to this, is when you're
Yeah.
first in the business, you're just so excited to get an order.
Yeah.
You'll just abandon all your pricing principles just because you get an order. And I don't know, is it harder to raise prices or lower them? I don't know. I'm asking.
It's definitely harder to raise them. I'll be 100% on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And I
would
think,
agree with that.
yeah. So Craig, kind of playing off on that too. I mean, the other thing when you talk about that, right, is it's okay to say no, and no can be a complete sentence. Oh, can I get a discount on this? No. Right. But we all feel that moment of like, oh, I've got to explain myself. They're going to think
Right.
it's okay to say no. If that's what it really means, right? Okay, I can't, that price is not going to work for me. I'm sorry. What normally happens is people will go, okay, and so now they've got to go spend time and effort trying to find somebody else that'll do it cheaper, blah,
Right.
blah, 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 blah. But what most likely will happen is they'll go, okay, well, like you said, I had to ask, right? And so, okay, we're there, you've got it. I, before I got in the decorating industry, I was actually involved in the log home industry weird enough, wild story. But I remember some of the most profitable homes that we ever built were all centered around somebody coming and had all these demands for time and price and all this other stuff. And we just said no straight away. And they all came back and actually ended up paying more, because by that time we're like, well, nope, actually now we're another couple weeks out and costs have gone up, right? So it's saying no, I think, is also a good thing for business owners to learn.
Yeah, and leaving the door open. You know, we had a client on, Allison was on one of our webcasts, and very experienced, been in the business a long time. And,
Yep.
you know, one of the questions that was asked is, you know, what do you do when a customer really puts you on the spot on pricing like that? And it was funny what she said. She goes, you know, I just have to sit down with them. I just say, hey, listen, I'm not going to be the cheapest, but the reason that you guys rely on me is because I'm on time. I do
Yep.
what I say. I'm reliable. I'm easy to get a hold of, but you pay for my creativity and all those great graphics and things that I come up with for your fundraising programs. That's part of the service that I offer. So
Yep.
you are certainly welcome to go and shop this around, but it's not apples to apples. You can't have me and all of the things that I provide at the bargain basement price. And she
Yep.
said just what you said, which is, you know, they'll leave for a while, and it's usually a buyer change. She goes, it's usually a buyer change. It'll be like a booster club situation, and you know, booster club parent is out and the new booster club parent is in, and they have other ideas. But I just thought that was such great advice, is
I
just kind
agree.
of having the little sit down, hey, this is how it is thing, and just being polite and being really honest and
Yep.
being human
Yep.
about it. I think that's one of the things I really hate about online sales, is because online sales is so impersonal. And I'm the same way, man. When I go and shop, and you know, I'm up online and maybe I'm going through Amazon, or whatever, you know,
Yep.
I pick the vendor based on the lowest price, not necessarily. Although if I have the option of doing it a direct Amazon purchase, ships from Amazon, I always do that because I've had bad experiences from
Sure.
some of their drop shippers. But
Yeah.
I think
And
it's
you're willing
okay
to
to
pay
have
for that
that
service.
sit down conversation.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with that completely. And I think the really cool part is that she just wasn't willing to become a commodity, because she does valuable goods. And I think that goes back to then believing in ourselves and believing our products. You kind of talked about that a little bit, of this idea that you've got to be, you know, starting off with that, you know, I know my services are worth this, because they are. And if you start off with that mentality, then the pricing conversation becomes so much easier. Like you said, you can have human conversations with them about the realities of the way things are, and I'd love to help you, and let's figure out how we can work together. What's the value that you need, and then we'll figure out a price that works. So
So should we be all offering free shipping?
No, just flat out no. I don't believe that free shipping is a requirement. I think that you have to look at what it is that your customers are expecting. And I think I mentioned it earlier, but just to make sure that I was clear on it, there is no such thing as free shipping. Everybody is always paying for it one way or the other, whether it's built in, whether it's whatever. So now there are certain platforms, like for example, Etsy. They changed their algorithm a while back, where if you were not offering free shipping, your organic reach was gone. And so you've got to be able to figure that out. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't just say, yes, you have to offer free shipping. I think that's a service that helps people make that buying decision. It's one less step for them to have to go, oh, should I or should I not, in an online situation. But at the end of the day, I don't think you have to. I think you have to figure out what's going to work for you and where you're at.
Yeah, we actually have data from that, because with the Inksoft platform on the
Yeah.
e-commerce, we
Yeah.
can track abandoned carts.
Nice.
And it's very, very, very low that people abandon their cart due to shipping,
Yeah.
you know, at the shipping stage. But, you know, again, sell from a position of strength. That's a hard cost to you.
Yep.
It's coming out of your pocket. And then
Yep.
in the immortal words of the Joe Dirt movie, one of my favorite quotes ever, this is a business. This is not a charity. Maybe one day UNICEF will get into the impound business, but until then, we're the people to see. And
I love
I've always loved that quote from Kevin Nealon in the movie,
it.
because
I love it.
it's just so true. We're not running a charity, we're running a
Yeah.
business.
Yep.
And the compass points north, and you know, north is profit. And if at the end of the day, you're sitting there and you don't have any money left over, you know, that's kind of on you. So
Yep.
being able to do careful planning and budgeting, and being able to do cost analysis, which is I know it's painful. I know people really don't like to do it,
Yep.
especially shop rates. That's a hard one because that's the one where you're like, wow, it does cost me money. I have to pay for insurance, and I have to pay for
Yeah.
electrical, and I have to pay for the pest control, and all the other incidental, now PPE and all the other
Yeah.
incidental costs we have these days.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's the point in your business where you become a grown up.
Yes.
Just when
Yes.
you start doing that. So let's look and see if there's any questions. One of the questions I had was, do you provide any kind of through OSG, any kind of spreadsheet to help with shop rates and to like any business tools to do help with that?
Yeah, we do, and it's fully, and then that's really what the 5 keys for us is all about, is digging in through that. So getting the shop rate, we've got a spreadsheet that lists out what we feel are like all the potential areas that you want to be looking at, and then taking all that and bringing it together, calculating some wages and things like that, and then turning that into your hourly rate, because it's one thing to look at like, oh my God, I've got $250,000 in expenses or something like that, right? That can be that scary number that you were just talking about.
Right.
But if you break that down into an hourly rate, maybe that is $75 to $100 an hour or something like that, whatever the numbers work out at, depending on the hours that you're able to put into your business. And then that breaks down even further from there. So if I can make 60 things an hour, then now I've got a whole different ball game when I'm talking about my costs. So I'm able to keep, I just work it down to such a place that it is manageable. So yes, we do have a spreadsheet. The little offer, one of the things that people will get is kind of a series of follow-up. I can kind of go back to that, but I've got a little page there. It's oursuccessgroup.com/graphicsflow. I just realized that I forgot to check if it was working, so I'll double check as soon as we're done here. But if you'll go there, you can get that. So what I was going to give people, Craig, if this is cool with you,
Yeah.
I wanted to give them a copy of these slides, and I can send this all through you guys too, either way, how
Perfect.
this works. I want to give them a copy of the slides and any of the notes so they kind of got it all. I know I kind of went fast. I wanted to try to get everything in. I do have a finding your why guide. I think that's a really important part of business, is really having a mission to go off of. And then we've got references and resources, and then we send part of that spreadsheet out to people to check out and see if they can. Most people can kind of figure it out, but if you want a little bit more help and support, we're there for you too. So
well, I really appreciate what you guys do. Having that business down to the last detail business coaching in our industry is so vitally important, and you guys really provide a valuable service. So you can definitely check out OSG's website. Looks like we have a landing page there, and those resources, I can put that through in the chat. Let's see here. It's just what is the Our Success Group?
Yep, oursuccessgroup.com/graphicsflow. Like I said, I just realized I forgot to check it. So it may not be up yet, but it will be
in the chat.
Awesome.
So you guys have that available to you.
Yeah, and I'll share all this stuff with you too, Craig, because I know you guys follow up with folks after the fact. So
yep, we sure do. Yep, we do. So I don't think I have anything else. I think we've got all the questions answered. I really appreciate. I just sent it out in the chat. Really appreciate you coming on. We'll do this again sometime.
Yeah,
it's a great topic. I know it's a little bit painful for some people because it does require you to take a close look at your business, but it's so critically important.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for coming on. Hey, plug your podcast real quick.
Sure. Two Regular Guys podcast. So it's 2, the number 2 is 2regularguys.com is where you can find all the information. And then every Friday at 10 a.m. Central Time, we have a live program. For 2 days from now, we'll have 10 a.m. I think this week we've got Lori Donovan from Sawgrass joining us. So we interview most of the time. A couple times we'll have a host show, but for the most part, it's cool to kind of keep up with people in the industry and just see what's going on. So we've got Lori joining us and have all sorts of different guests. So one of these days we got to get you on, Craig. So we'll connect on that. Yeah.
All right, perfect. Yeah. So I'm going to stop the recording, and it looks like there's just a couple more questions, but again, thanks for joining us. And we are out. All right, take care. Bye.